Daniel walked slowly through the smoke-filled ruins, his boots crunching on broken metal and shattered glass. The battlefield had been quiet for hours, but the silence was heavy, almost suffocating. Smoke rose from distant fires, twisting into the darkening sky like thin, black fingers. He paused to catch his breath, his heart still pounding from the last fight. Around him, the alien city lay in ruins. Buildings were twisted and broken, streets torn apart, and strange, alien vehicles lay scattered and burned. It was hard to imagine that this had once been a thriving place, full of life and energy. Now only silence remained. As he moved cautiously forward, Daniel saw movement near a collapsed building. At first, he thought it might be a raider or some kind of scavenger, but as he got closer, he realized it was someone entirely different. A young alien woman was standing there, her body tense but weary. Her skin was pale with faint patterns of light blue markings that shimmered slightly even. In the fading sunlight, two small children clung to her legs, their wide eyes staring at him, full of fear and confusion. Daniel instinctively lowered his weapon, realizing they posed no threat. The woman's eyes were deep and sad, and yet there was something strong in her gaze. She stepped forward slightly and spoke in careful, accented English. I need help. My husband. He is gone. The war. It took him. Please. Will you help me? Her voice trembled, but her posture remained upright. She looked more tired than scared, but Daniel could see the weight of grief pressing on her shoulders. The children, sensing her distress, held even tighter to her legs. Daniel hesitated. He had been trained to fight, to survive alone, and yet something about her made him pause. She was small, fragile, and alone in a world that had turned cruel and dangerous. And yet, she carried herself like a survivor. Something about her eyes made him trust her instinctively, even if he didn't understand why. He slowly lowered his weapon all the way and nodded. I'll help, but we have to move carefully. It's not safe here. The woman nodded, relief washing over her face. Thank you, human, she said softly. I am Lyra. These are my children, Nari and Kito. My husband. He fought to protect us. But now, I have no one. I cannot protect them alone. Her voice broke at the last words, and she swallowed, hard, holding back tears. Daniel could see the pain she carried, the emptiness left by a life interrupted by war. For a moment, silence fell between them, broken only by the distant crackle of fire. The children peeked up at Daniel, shy but curious. Their eyes were wide, innocent, and full of trust that he felt unprepared to carry. He knelt slightly to meet their gaze, forcing a smile. I'm Daniel. I will keep you safe, he said simply. The children hesitated, then slowly reached out their hands. Nari's tiny fingers brushed his glove first, followed by Kito's. Daniel felt an unexpected warmth spread through him. It was a small connection in a world that had become cold and harsh. Lyra watched him carefully, measuring whether his words were true. Finally, she nodded, stepping closer so the children could follow. We have to leave this place tonight, she said. There are people who would harm us. Humans, aliens. It does not matter. They will take what is ours if they can. You must promise. Keep my children safe. Her voice was quiet, but there was an edge of steel to it that made Daniel understand the seriousness of her plea. He nodded again, more firmly this time. I promise. We'll survive together. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they began to move. The city around them was shadowed and broken, but Daniel felt a strange sense of purpose. For the first time in weeks, he was not just a soldier, wandering a battlefield. He was part of something larger, something worth protecting. Lyra walked beside him, her steps steady, her eyes scanning the ruins with quiet alertness. The children followed close behind, trusting him even though they had only just met. That night they made camp in a small ruined building. the walls half collapsed but offering some cover. Daniel built a small fire while Lyra prepared some of the rations she had salvaged. The children huddled near the warmth, their small hands clutching pieces of dried food. Lyra sat beside Daniel, her expression tired but relieved. "I will sleep beside you," she said quietly, almost as a warning to herself, not him. "It is not for comfort, only to watch over them. They are all I have left. Keep them safe, human. That is all I ask." Daniel nodded, understanding the weight of her words. This was not a request for friendship or love, it was a plea for survival, for trust in a world that had lost its sense of safety. He could feel the responsibility pressing on him, heavy but not unwelcome. For the first time, he realized that survival meant more than staying alive. It meant protecting life, nurturing hope, and standing beside those who could not stand alone. As the fire flickered and the stars appeared in the alien sky above, Daniel settled beside Lyra. The children slept, exhausted but safe for now. And in the quiet darkness, a bond was formed, one born of loss, trust, and the unspoken promise that they would face whatever came next together. The next morning, the sun rose pale and thin above the broken city, casting long shadows over the ruins. Daniel woke first, careful not to disturb Lyra or the children. The air smelled of smoke and ash, and every step outside the shelter reminded him of the danger surrounding them. He checked their small pack of supplies, counting rations and water, noting that they would need to move quickly to find a safer place. Lyra stirred, brushing her hair back and quietly nudging the children. Awake, Nari yawned and rubbed her eyes while Quito clung to her mother's side, still afraid of the vast emptiness around them. "Are we safe here?" Nari asked softly, her voice trembling. Lyra shook her head. "Not for long. We must keep moving. There are people, humans, aliens, who will not care about us. They will see us as easy prey." Her eyes met Daniel's, searching for reassurance. He offered a small, steady nod. "We'll be safe as long as we move carefully," he said. "I'll watch over you all." They set out cautiously, stepping over twisted metal and fallen beams. Daniel led the way, scanning the horizon for danger, while Lyra followed closely, keeping a protective hand on the children. The ruins were eerie, almost quiet enough to forget the war had even happened. Broken statues and shattered buildings told stories of a civilization that once thrived here. Lyra paused sometimes, pointing out symbols etched into walls. Small, signs of her people's culture and history. Daniel listened, fascinated, realizing that this world had once been full of beauty, now nearly lost to violence. As they walked, Daniel noticed that the children were slowly gaining confidence. Nari's small hand stayed in Lyra's, but she began to peek around corners and climb over rubble with curiosity. Quito, still shy, began following Daniel's steps, sometimes looking up at him for reassurance. Lyra smiled faintly at the sight, but it was a small smile, tinged with worry. "They need hope," she said quietly. "Even if it is only a little, it must grow in them. Otherwise, they will be lost." By mid-afternoon, the group reached a shallow valley that offered some cover from the wind and the burned horizon. Daniel suggested they rest, and Lyra nodded, guiding the children to sit beneath a broken wall. He unpacked what little food they had, handing pieces to the children first. They ate silently at first, still wary of the unknown world around them, but slowly, laughter and chatter began to fill the space. Nari asked Daniel questions about his life before the war, and Quito attempted to mimic the small mechanical tools Daniel carried. Daniel found himself smiling more than he had in weeks, feeling a sense of warmth he did not expect. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Lyra gathered the children and spoke softly. "We cannot stay here long. We need a place where no one will find us. A sanctuary, somewhere safe." Daniel nodded, thinking of distant maps and rumors he had heard from other survivors. He had heard whispers of valleys and caves where humans and aliens had found safety together. "I know a place," he said. "It is not far. If we move carefully, we can reach it by nightfall. The journey resumed, slower this time, as the shadows lengthened and the temperature dropped. Daniel and Lyra took turns scouting ahead, keeping an eye out for movement in the ruined landscape. They moved silently, communicating with small gestures and brief words. The children walked between them, trusting that the adults would protect them. Daniel noticed how Lyra's presence made him more alert, more aware of danger and yet more patient. She had a way of moving through the ruins that spoke of experience and careful observation, and he realized she had survived much more than he had imagined. As darkness approached, they found a partially collapsed building that offered some shelter. Daniel built a small fire, careful not to make too much smoke. The children huddled close, their small bodies warming against the cold night air. Lyra sat beside Daniel, watching him work with quiet intensity. "You are not just strong," she said, her voice low and thoughtful. "You are careful and kind. It is rare to find both in one person." Daniel looked at her, unsure how to respond. He had never expected praise or gratitude. He had only wanted to survive. Yet hearing her words, he felt a flicker of pride and a deeper connection. That night, as the children slept between them, Lyra spoke softly, almost to herself. "I am not asking for friendship, only protection. Keep them safe, human. That is all I ask." Daniel understood fully now that her trust was fragile and precious. He nodded silently, letting the fire's warmth and the quiet night settle around them. In that moment, the bond between them deepened. Not as strangers, but as allies, as guardians of innocent life. Outside, the ruins lay silent under the stars. But Daniel no longer felt the emptiness he had felt before. He realized that survival was no longer about escaping alone. It was about protecting those who could not protect themselves. And in the quiet of the alien night, with Lyra watching over her children and him, he understood that their journey had only just begun. The group moved cautiously through the ruins, the air thick with smoke and dust. Daniel led the way, his eyes scanning every broken corner, every shadow that might hide danger. Lyra walked close behind, holding her children's hands tightly. Nari and Quito shuffled carefully over jagged debris, their small feet making soft crunching sounds that seemed deafening in the eerie silence of the deserted city. Though the war had ended hours ago, the destruction remained, a reminder that danger could appear at any moment. Daniel noticed how skilled Lyra was at navigating the ruins. She moved lightly, stepping over unstable rubble and pointing out hidden passages through fallen walls. Her knowledge of the city surprised him. It was clear she had spent her life learning these paths. Even in her grief, she had the presence of a protector, and Daniel realized that she had survived this long not because of luck, but because of her sharp mind and careful planning. They paused near a collapsed bridge, the remains of what had once been a grand structure stretching over a dried-up canal. Daniel crouched to check for stability, tapping the metal beams with his boots. "We can cross here, but slowly," he said. Lyra nodded, her eyes never leaving the children. Nari's hand slipped from her mother's grasp for a moment, but Lyra caught it quickly. "Step carefully," she whispered. "One at a time. Trust the ground, but do not trust the shadows." The crossing was slow. Daniel went first, testing the footing and moving with deliberate care. Lyra followed with the children, helping them step over gaps in the beams and twisted metal. Every movement required concentration, and the silence around them made even the smallest sound feel loud. Quito glanced up at Daniel, fear in his wide eyes, but Daniel offered a small smile. "You're doing great," he said gently. The boy's lips quivered, but he nodded and held his mother's hand tighter. Once across, they continued through the streets, stepping over overturned vehicles and piles of broken stone. Occasionally, they would pause to let the children rest, offering small rations and water. Lyra spoke softly to them, telling stories of their home and their father, keeping the memories alive. Daniel watched her, impressed by her strength. Even in her sorrow, she could bring comfort and hope to the children. It was a reminder to him that courage was not always about fighting. It was about protecting, guiding, and caring for those who depended on you. As the sun began to lower in the down sky, they reached the outskirts of the ruined city. The landscape changed from broken buildings to charred fields and scattered trees. It was open but less dangerous in some ways. There were fewer places for enemies to hide. Daniel slowed their pace, scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. Lyra crouched beside him, her expression serious. "We are not alone," she said quietly. "There are others, survivors, hunters. They may see us as prey or a threat. We must remain alert." The warning reminded Daniel that their journey would not be easy. Even though the war had officially ended, the chaos and fear remained. Humans and aliens alike roamed the land, some desperate, some cruel, but he felt a growing determination. He had made a promise to Lyra, a promise to protect her children, and he would keep it. For the first time, survival felt like more than just running or hiding. It was about responsibility, about courage, about hope. As evening fell, they found a small shelter among the ruins of an old marketplace. It was mostly intact, with a roof that had survived the destruction and walls that could block the wind. Daniel and Lyra helped the children settle down, sharing what food and water remained. They built a small fire for warmth, careful not to make too much smoke that might attract unwanted attention. Nari leaned against her mother, yawning heavily, while Quito clung to Daniel's side, tired but safe. Lyra watched the children sleep, for a long time, her hands brushing over their hair, protecting them even in rest. "They are strong," she whispered to Daniel. "Stronger than I expected, and yet they still need us." Daniel nodded, understanding fully. Strength alone would not keep them alive. It was care, attention, and vigilance that would. That night, as the fire crackled softly and the stars appeared above the ruins, Daniel and Lyra sat side by side, quietly sharing the watch. Neither spoke much, but there was a sense of trust between them, a silent understanding that they were bound together in purpose. Though the journey ahead was uncertain, Daniel felt a small, firm hope growing inside him. Together they could face the dangers of the ruined world. Together they could protect the children. And in that quiet night, surrounded by the shadows of destruction, he realized that survival was no longer about himself alone. It was about them, about hope, and about building something stronger than fear. The morning air was cool and quiet, but Daniel knew the silence was not safe. The ruins around them were deceptive. Empty streets often hid danger, and the faint sounds of distant movement kept him alert. Lyra stirred first, gently waking Nari and Quito. The children rubbed their eyes sleepily, still clinging to her for reassurance. Daniel packed their remaining supplies, making sure food and water were organized. Every small action felt heavy, with responsibility. He had promised Lyra he would protect these children, and he meant to keep that promise. They moved through a narrow alleyway, the walls of collapsed buildings looming over them. Daniel led, his senses sharp for any hint of movement. Lyra walked behind, whispering soft encouragement to the children and keeping them close. The ruins were eerily quiet at first, but soon faint noises reached their ears, footsteps, distant and uneven. Daniel crouched, signaling the group to halt. He peered around a crumbled corner and caught sight of a small group of human scavengers moving cautiously through the debris. Their faces were hardened, eyes scanning for anything valuable or vulnerable. "They've spotted us," Daniel whispered. Lyra's hands tightened around the children, her jaw set with determination. "We must not run blindly," she said. "We can hide, or we can move carefully and confuse them. It is not only speed that saves us, but thought." Daniel nodded, silently agreeing. They ducked into the shadows of a broken building, the children pressed close to their sides. Using the cover, they edged along narrow passages and stairways, avoiding open streets. Daniel could feel his heart racing, but he focused on calm breathing and careful steps, knowing panic would be worse than the hunters themselves. As they moved, the scavengers split up, some heading down the main street, while others circled through smaller paths. Lyra guided Daniel and the children through a series of hidden tunnels and collapsed walls, showing him secret routes she had memorized from her past. Daniel marveled at her knowledge. Even in this devastated world, she seemed capable of navigating it like it was second nature. "This way," she whispered, leading them toward a half-collapsed bridge that overlooked a shallow creek. "We can cross there. It will slow them if they follow." Daniel nodded, helping Nari and Keto across the uneven beams. The children clung tightly to Lyra, their small hands trembling but trusting. Daniel followed, keeping his rifle ready, though he hoped it would not be needed. They reached the far side safely, the sounds of pursuit fading as the scavengers hesitated at the unstable crossing. Lyra allowed herself a small sigh of relief, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "We are not yet safe," she said, but her voice carried a hint of pride. "But we can survive this." The group continued through the ruins, moving toward a more open area where Daniel hoped they could rest. Along the way, Lyra and Daniel developed a silent rhythm. He would scout ahead while she guided the children, and then she would lead while he remained watchful. The children began to relax slightly, though their eyes remained wide, aware of the danger surrounding them. Daniel felt a deep respect for Lyra. She was not only protecting her children but teaching them how to survive. Her strength was quiet, but undeniable, a force that inspired trust and courage in those around her. By late afternoon, they reached an old courtyard partially shielded by fallen walls. Daniel built a small fire, careful to keep the smoke minimal, while Lyra distributed water and small rations to the children. Nari and Keto ate quickly, their hunger overcoming fear, and Daniel felt a small wave of relief. They were safe for now, but he knew the day was not over. The hunters might still be nearby, watching, waiting for any sign of weakness. As evening approached, the distant sound of shouting and hurried footsteps reached them. Daniel's heart sank. Lyra's expression hardened immediately, her eyes scanning the horizon. "They are coming," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We must prepare. The children stay here. We will protect them." Daniel nodded, gripping his rifle tightly. For the first time, he saw the full extent of her resolve. She was not merely a grieving widow. She was a warrior, a mother willing to face danger to keep her children alive. The hunters arrived quickly, surrounding the courtyard. Daniel and Lyra moved in coordination, positioning themselves between the children and the approaching group. Daniel fired warning shots, careful to aim where no one would be seriously harmed, while Lyra brandished a long spear she had salvaged from her husband's belongings. Her movements were precise and practiced, each step calculated. Daniel realized that Lyra's grief had not made her weak. It had made her focused, capable, and unyielding. Together, they formed a barrier the hunters could not easily cross. Hours passed as the hunters attempted to breach their position. Daniel and Lyra held firm, moving strategically, using the ruins to their advantage. The children huddled behind them, safe for the moment, watching the adults with wide, frightened eyes. Though exhausted and tense, Daniel felt a sense of pride and awe. Lyra's courage and skill had kept them alive, and together they had proven that even in a world full of danger, determination and care could create a shield strong enough to protect the innocent. As night fell, the hunters retreated, realizing that the human soldier and the alien widow were not easy prey. Daniel lowered his rifle, breathing heavily, and Lyra wiped sweat and ash from her face. The children, still trembling, clung to her tightly. Daniel met her gaze, and they shared a silent understanding. The danger was not over, but they had survived, together. In that quiet, dark courtyard surrounded by ruined buildings and distant fires, Daniel realized that survival was not about fear. It was about courage, partnership, and the promise to protect those who could not protect themselves. The night was quiet, but Daniel knew it was only a temporary calm. He and Lyra had stayed close to the children, keeping watch in shifts, but neither fully relaxed. Every sound of movement in the distance made their hearts beat faster. The ruined city around them was a maze of shadows, broken buildings, and empty streets. and even the smallest noise could signal danger. Nari and Keto slept fitfully, their dreams likely haunted by the sights of destruction they had witnessed. Lyra brushed, a strand of hair from Nari's face whispering softly to calm her. "Sleep, little one, we are here, you are safe." Daniel watched, feeling a growing admiration for her strength. Morning brought a cold, gray light. They ate small portions of rations and prepared to move. The hunters from the previous night were likely still nearby, and Daniel knew they would not give up easily. "We have to keep moving," he said. Lyra nodded, gathering the children and checking their supplies. They moved carefully, using narrow alleys and hidden passages to avoid open streets. Daniel led the way, scanning for threats, while Lyra guided the children over rubble and collapsed walls. Every step required patience and attention. The day passed slowly, filled with careful navigation. They avoided groups of survivors, some desperate and some cruel, and relied on Lyra's knowledge of the city to find safer paths. She taught Daniel how to read subtle signs, footprints in dust, broken branches, and scraps of cloth that indicated others had passed by recently. He learned quickly, impressed by her instincts. "You see what others miss," he said quietly. Lyra gave a faint smile. "Experience teaches. Grief teaches more. You learn to notice what matters most: safety, life, small signs of hope." By afternoon, they reached an old courtyard surrounded by partially collapsed buildings. Daniel suggested they rest, and Lyra agreed. They settled the children near a sheltered corner and built a small fire. While the children ate and drank, Daniel and Lyra spoke quietly. "We cannot stay long," Daniel said. "The hunters could return, but we need to rest before nightfall." Lyra nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "Yes, we must be ready. Together, we can face what comes." As evening fell, distant voices echoed through the ruins. Daniel tensed, signaling Lyra to quiet the children. The hunters had found them again, likely having tracked their movements during the day. Lyra's expression hardened, and she positioned herself between the children and the approaching danger. "Stay behind me," she whispered. "No matter what happens, we will protect them." Daniel's heart pounded, but he nodded, realizing the truth in her words. Protection was not optional, it was their responsibility. The hunters arrived, cautious and calculating, trying to surround the small group. Daniel and Lyra moved instinctively, using the broken buildings as cover. Daniel fired warning shots, careful to avoid harming anyone unnecessarily, while Lyra wielded her late husband's spear with precision. Each movement was deliberate, combining defense and distraction to prevent the hunters from advancing. The children huddled quietly, trusting the adults to shield them from harm. Daniel marveled at Lyra's focus. Her grief had not weakened her. It had made her stronger, sharper, and more determined. The fight continued for what felt like hours. The hunters attempted to flank them, but Daniel and Lyra's coordination held. Daniel's rifle covered one side while Lyra maneuvered to block the other, her movements fluid and precise. Every time Daniel's attention shifted, Lyra's sharp instincts compensated, ensuring the children remained safe. The teamwork between them was silent but perfect, a bond forged through necessity, trust, and shared purpose. As night fell completely, the hunters realized that they could not break through the defense. Frustrated, they began to retreat, disappearing into the ruins from which they came. Daniel lowered his rifle, breathing heavily, and Lyra sheathed her spear, her body tense but triumphant. The children, still frightened, clung to her, and Daniel reached out to offer reassurance. "We are safe for now," he said. Lyra nodded silently, acknowledging the temporary peace but aware that more challenges lay ahead. After the hunters left, Daniel and Lyra tended to the children, giving them water and quiet comfort. Nari and Keto, exhausted, finally drifted into peaceful sleep. Daniel watched them, feeling a deep sense of responsibility and connection. He understood now that survival was not about fleeing or fighting alone. It was about standing firm, protecting the innocent, and trusting each other, to face danger together. Lyra, sitting beside him, mirrored his thoughts. Though grief still shadowed her eyes, her determination to protect her children shone brighter. They spent the rest of the night quietly near the small fire, keeping watch in turns. Daniel realized that this experience had changed him. He was no longer just a soldier surviving the chaos. He had become a guardian, a partner and a protector of life that was not his own. Lyra's presence had taught him that true strength was measured not by weapons or power, but by courage, care, and the ability to stand firm in the face of fear. When dawn broke, the city was still and quiet again, but Daniel and Lyra knew that the world around them remained dangerous. They gathered their belongings, ready to continue their journey. They would face more hunters, more uncertainty, and more challenges, but together they were stronger. The children, though small and vulnerable, had grown braver with each passing day. And Daniel understood that no matter what came next, they would survive, because survival was about more than just living. It was about protecting hope, family, and the promise to keep each other safe. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of green from patches of grass that had begun to grow amidst the ruins. Daniel led the group carefully, scanning the landscape for any signs of danger. Lyra followed closely with Nari and Quito in hand. The children were more confident now, walking steadily over debris and fallen stones, their trust in Daniel and Lyra growing with every step. The world was still dangerous, but for the first time in days, the group felt a small sense of hope. Daniel had heard rumors of a hidden valley beyond the ruins, a place where humans and aliens who had survived the war sought refuge. No one outside the safe zones would know its location, and few dared to travel there because of the dangers along the way. He shared this hope with Lyra, and she nodded quietly, her eyes reflecting relief mixed with determination. "If it exists," she said softly, "it will be the first place my children can be safe. I will trust you to take us there." Daniel felt the weight of her words. This was more than a journey. It was a mission to protect life itself. As they moved, the terrain became rougher. Jagged cliffs rose on one side, and a narrow river ran along the other. They had to climb over fallen rocks and wade through shallow streams, sometimes slipping and laughing quietly as they helped the children navigate obstacles. Nari and Quito, though still cautious, began to show glimpses of bravery. Nari reached for Daniel's hand without hesitation when a loose stone rolled underfoot, and Quito began pointing out safe paths through the water, imitating the careful guidance he had seen from Lyra. Daniel smiled at their growing confidence. Around midday, they encountered a group of travelers, humans who looked wary and cautious. Lyra tensed, instinctively moving in front of the children. The travelers eyed them suspiciously, but said nothing at first. Daniel stepped forward, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "We are looking for the safe valley," he said calmly. "We mean no harm. We are protecting these children." The travelers studied them for a long moment, then nodded slightly, allowing them to pass. Lyra exhaled quietly, and the children held on to her tightly, relieved that this encounter had ended without conflict. As the sun began to set, they reached a plateau overlooking a valley. The sight took their breath away. The valley was lush and green, a stark contrast to the gray ruins they had left behind. Small shelters could be seen along the edge, with humans and aliens moving about peacefully. Daniel's heart lifted. It was more beautiful and serene than he had imagined. Lyra's eyes glistened as she took in the view. "This is it," she whispered, almost in disbelief. "This is where they will be safe." Descending into the valley, they were greeted by a small group of alien and human settlers. At first, the newcomers looked at them with curiosity, but when Nari and Quito stepped forward holding Daniel's and Lyra's hands, their faces softened. The children's trust and innocence broke the tension, showing that these travelers were not a threat but a family seeking peace. The settlers offered food, water, and warmth, and Lyra allowed herself a small smile. For the first time in many days, she felt the weight of constant fear lighten. That night, as they settled into a small shelter, the children laughed quietly while eating, their tired faces finally showing signs of relief. Daniel and Lyra sat nearby, exhausted but at ease. "They are safe here," Lyra said softly, brushing Kito's hair from his forehead. "And we are safe for now." Daniel nodded. He realized that this valley represented more than survival. It represented hope. The children could grow up without constant fear. They could learn, play, and live in a world that was beginning to heal. As darkness settled over the valley, Daniel and Lyra stood outside, looking at the lights from other shelters. "You did well," Daniel said, looking at Lyra. "You led us through danger, kept the children safe, and never lost hope." Lyra smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the stars above. "We did it together," she replied. "I could not have done it alone. And these children, they remind me why it is worth fighting for every day." Daniel felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This journey had changed him, and not just because of the dangers they had faced. He had learned the importance of trust, courage, and hope. Lyra had taught him that survival was about more than living. It was about protecting, guiding, and believing in the future, even when it seemed uncertain. The children slept peacefully nearby, and for the first time, Daniel felt that their lives had a chance to begin again, free from the shadows of war. Under the quiet glow of the valley, Daniel and Lyra silently made a promise to each other and to the children. No matter what challenges remained, they would protect this small family and this new hope. The valley was not just a refuge, it was a beginning. And for the first time in a long while, they felt that they could breathe, laugh, and live without fear. The valley had settled into a quiet rhythm, a peaceful contrast to the chaos of the ruined world outside. Daniel walked along a small path with Lyra beside him, keeping a watchful eye on Nari and Kito as they explored the nearby trees and streams. The children laughed freely, chasing each other across the grass, their faces bright with happiness for the first time since the war had taken their home. Daniel felt a warmth in his chest, seeing the life and hope returning to them, knowing that he had kept his promise to Lyra. Lyra paused for a moment, watching the children. Her eyes softened, reflecting a mix of pride, relief, and lingering grief. "They are growing braver every day," she said quietly. "I never thought I would see them smile like this again." Daniel nodded, understanding fully. "It's because of you," he said. "Your courage, your care. You taught them how to survive, and they are stronger for it." She shook her head, smiling faintly. "We survived together. You taught me too, human. You reminded me that trust and hope are stronger than fear." As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the valley, Daniel and Lyra guided the children to a small clearing near a gentle stream. They had discovered this spot the day before and found it perfect for quiet moments of rest. The children sat by the water, dipping their hands into the cool flow and skipping small stones across the surface. Lyra sat beside Daniel, her expression thoughtful. "I will not ask for love," she said softly. "I cannot. Not yet. I only ask that you keep them safe." Daniel smiled gently, placing a hand over hers. "That is my promise," he said, "and I will not break it. You do not need to ask me anything more." The three of them watched as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange, pink, and purple. Daniel realized that this moment was rare, a pause in the constant struggle of survival. For once there was no immediate danger, no hunters, no ruined cities. Just life, small and fragile, but beautiful. The children laughed as Kito tried to jump over a fallen log and stumbled, and Nari helped him steady himself. Daniel felt a sense of pride, knowing that these small victories of childhood were possible because of the safety they had found together. That evening, the community in the valley gathered around small fires, sharing food and stories. Humans and aliens alike moved freely among each other, showing that peace, though fragile, was possible. Lyra introduced Daniel to some of the other settlers, explaining how he had helped them survive the journey. People nodded with respect and curiosity, seeing the bond that had formed between the human and the alien family. It was clear that Daniel had not only protected them, but had earned their trust and admiration. After the gathering, Daniel and Lyra returned to their small shelter with the children. The night was calm, filled with the sounds of wind rustling through the trees and water gently flowing in the nearby stream. Nari and Quito lay asleep, their breathing steady and peaceful. Daniel looked at Lyra, who was quietly sitting beside him, her eyes reflecting the flickering light of their small fire. "We did it," he whispered. Lyra nodded, a faint smile crossing her lips. "Yes, we did. They are safe, and we can finally breathe. For now, that is enough." Daniel realized that this journey had changed him forever. He had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty, but he had also discovered courage, compassion, and the importance of protecting life that was not his own. Lyra had taught him that strength was not measured by power alone, but by care, determination, and the willingness to stand firm when everything else seemed lost. He had learned that even in a broken world, hope could grow if people chose to protect it. As the night deepened, Daniel and Lyra sat quietly together, watching the stars above. The valley stretched around them, filled with small lights from other shelters and the gentle sounds of life. Daniel placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder, feeling the warmth of her presence. "We will protect them," he said softly, "always, no matter what comes next." Lyra leaned slightly against him, a quiet trust in her posture. "I believe you, human. You have shown me that hope can survive, that we can survive." For the first time since the war, Daniel felt a sense of lasting peace. They had survived not just because of strength, but because of courage, trust, and care for each other. The children slept safely, the community thrived quietly in their hidden valley, and the night sky stretched endlessly above, full of possibilities. Daniel knew that the future would still have challenges, but he also knew that together they could face anything. In that quiet, peaceful valley, a human soldier, an alien widow, and two small children had found more than safety. They had found trust, hope, and a bond stronger than fear. And as they sat side by side under the stars, Daniel made an unspoken promise to himself and to Lyra. No matter what dangers remained in the world, he would never let them fall. Together, they had survived. Together, they would thrive. And together, they had built a new beginning, bright with the promise of life, love, and hope.